Ed, this is Zach Clark. I'm so glad to get this question from you, and I wanted to just take the time to do a video just for you addressing your question. How do I prepare our community to invest in a capital campaign? By community, you're meaning your school, the school community, the reach that you have. How do I prepare our community, our people, our audiences to invest in a capital campaign? Now, when you say invest in a capital campaign, there's two different things that come to my mind. I'm going to try to address both of them because you may be asking the question from one or the other of these perspectives. Obviously, the first thing you could be asking is, how do I get our community ready to spend the money it takes to do a campaign? Maybe there's some people that are hesitant or concerned about just the cost of raising money. There's just some general things I think you can share with people. I mean, the cost of a campaign is anywhere from 10% of the goal to maybe as high as 25%. I'd say that's kind of a range of normal. There are some that do successful campaigns for far less. There are some that do successful campaigns that cost much more. It's sort of become cool to talk about how low your cost of fundraising, or your cost of administration, or your cost of staff is relative to what's given. But the reality is, it takes different costs related to different dollars. It's a very low cost to raise money face to face. It's a very high cost to raise money in terms of direct mail. So some of the best, most reputable organizations out there are very reluctant to put a fixed cost as a percentage of fundraising as somehow, the right thing, the right level, and that anything else is wrong or bad. So I think again, a good range of normal, I know it's a wide range, but is 10% to 25%. It's that whole, you've probably heard me use the example of and you can certainly use this to help people understand the idea that if you gave me a quarter piece and I gave you $1, and you gave me another quarter and I gave you $1, and you gave me another quarter, and then you ran out of quarters, you would probably go get more quarters, so that as long as I was going to keep handing out those dollars, right? So that can be a helpful thing to help people understand as well, that you're buying dollars for quarters. The other thing I would say is, we can certainly give you more insight and information if that's really your question about costs of campaign and raising money, because every situation is unique. So I would need to learn a little bit more about your situation, what you're currently raising, your staff capacity, all that kind of stuff. The second way you could be asking this question, though, is how do you begin to get your community, all these different audiences, ready to actually invest through their giving to a campaign? How do you get them ready, as a sense, what's called campaign readiness? And there's actually several different ways to do this. Most consultants would tell you that the way to do it is to do a feasibility study. So I certainly want to talk about that. But one of the very simplest ways to do this is to do what I call build due diligence into everything that you're doing. And so what I mean is that even if you don't have a solidified plan, have a set of talking points, sort of a draft idea of where you're wanting to go with a future campaign, and be very intentional about meeting with probably about 100 different people. I'd say 100 individual conversations, just getting their feedback. Saying, here's some things we're working on, thinking about, some planning we've been doing. What advice do you have for me? What input do you have? What questions come to your mind? Do our goals sound doable? Or how do you react? If you were going to be being asked to give to this, what are some of the things that you would want to understand and see and know? Who are other people that I need to be talking to? So an excellent way to begin to prepare people for a campaign is to be intentional, and maybe even engage some board members in having a series of about 100 individual conversations. And after that, you will really have a sense of what's out there. We know that after about 100 individual meetings, you will have heard everything that you're going to hear. It gets you basically stop getting surprised at some of the feedback that people give you. Of course, the traditional way to do it that's touted by most consultants is the feasibility study, where you hire an outside group to come in and do a series of interviews as well as surveys and various things to get input from people. I've gotten to a point where I don't recommend those as often as most people do. My dad always called it the ritualistic mating dance of the campaign consultant. I would say, 9 times out of 10 people will tell you that you've got to do it. I would say more like 1 time out of 10 is it actually truly necessary, because all it does is give you a snapshot of how people are reacting at this point in time. Now, that being said, the process of doing a study that's well done does begin to cultivate and create that awareness that this is coming. It begins to get people ready. So when we do studies, we call them due diligence studies, research and due diligence. And one of the primary reasons that I do sometimes recommend them is in a situation where there's no question that there's a lot of alignment and unity that's really lacking, that we would want to see come together ahead of a campaign. And a study is a great way to do that, great way to get everybody on the same page, because you're engaging so many people in asking for their input and advice. A third way to do it that doesn't involve quite so much individuals being talked with is through a planning process where you get a small group of people together and really start looking at what is our vision, what is the strategy for how we're moving forward toward this vision, what are we doing to improve our school, to improve our organization and its ability to move forward on its vision, and then what are the specific projects, what are the specific steps that we might take that a capital campaign would really be needed to address. So pulling together 10 or 12 people in a group and engaging them in that planning process, even though that's a small group, if they're the right people that have been picked, that can really get the ball rolling as well for you to start then having other small group meetings and engaging input from those folks. So you could call those advisory groups, you could call them planning groups, development planning groups, strategic planning, whatever the case may be. But that's an excellent way to do that as well. And of course, one of the most robust ways to do that is through an actual strategic planning process, because a well orchestrated strategic planning process, and it's involving all segments of your constituents. What that results in is a plan to which people feel a great deal of ownership and responsibility because they had a lot of input into that process. And what happens is they start to realize we have this plan, that this is this pile of amazing work and things to do, many of which cost money that we don't yet have. And so that becomes that catalyst for a capital campaign as well. So those are all things that are really all fall under the category of readiness and growing the community. The last thing I want to say on this is that I think a mistake that's made, and I was a little concerned when I saw your question about this, a mistake that's usually made about campaigns is people say, okay, we've got to have our case, we've got to have our materials, we got to have all the answers to all the questions that are going to be asked, we got to have all the plans together, we got to have all the costs, and then we're going to be ready for a campaign. And what you're going to be ready for is failure when you do that. Campaigns are in many ways self-fulfilling prophecies. So people have to really move forward together with you. It starts slowly, somewhat quietly. It starts to gain steam, and you get more and more involved. It starts very broad and somewhat vague because you're still trying to get definition. And the farther along you go, the more specific, the more detailed this all becomes. So that would be my one word of caution, is make sure that when you're talking about preparing, you're not sort of sitting still, navel gazing quietly. You should be engaging people, because it's through that process that that momentum begins to build, and the community begins to really experience the reality that God is working, and that these unexpected, maybe even impossible things can happen as people actually get involved and really make decisions and move forward. So, what a great question, Ed. I really appreciate it. Hope this helps, and really looking forward to some future conversation with you as well, okay? Thank you so much.